Vasia, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for this invitation.
No problem. I am so excited, guys. I feel like we've been trying to get this going for a little bit, and then I got confused with the time change, but we're here and I'm excited. Vasia is a licensed psychologist, and she's also the head psychologist and founder of AntiLoneliness, which we will get into and explain. So please tell us about yourself and what inspired you along your journey.
Well, I'm a Greek psychologist, as you can understand from my last name. It's a Greek name, and I studied psychology in Greece. And after having worked there for a couple of years, then I decided that I wanted to try something abroad, and that's why I moved to the Netherlands. And I've been living here for about 8 years, and that has been a very interesting to transformational, I can say, experience for me in many levels, personal and professional level. But professionally speaking, this is the place where I founded my own company, which is AntiLoneliness. And this is actually my private practice. It started as a solo practice, but now it's a group practice with me as the head psychologist and another 12 psychologists working together with me. Um, and it's then the reason that I choose this name is because I think that loneliness is something we experience when we're going through mental health struggles and challenges. We feel that we are very different and we cannot share it with anybody because they will reject us, they will judge us, they will not like us anymore, and we keep it to ourselves, and that's a huge loneliness. That's a very lonely place to be. So that's one reason why I named it anti-loneliness, because people, when they reach out and they ask for help and support in their mental struggles, then they feel less lonely. But also because we are living in an era where we have kind of lost our ability to connect in a deep and meaningful way with other people. Maybe technology, maybe social media, maybe something has intervened and we are not as connected as before. And I wanted to bring more awareness on the topic of loneliness and authentic connections. So that's a short version of why I chose this name and about my company here. I'm a psychologist and I've been trained in schema therapy, emotionally focused therapy, and also grief counseling. And I love supporting people in their struggles with anxiety, depression, burnout, perfectionism, but also relationship issues.
Vasia, I think what you're doing is so cool. I love how you're connecting people based on their loneliness. Because how many times, I mean, I've felt alone and I have so many great people with me, thank God. But sometimes I do feel alone. And I feel like if I haven't really spoken about it with anyone, I might think I'm the only one. But you're connecting everybody on the same idea that everybody feels alone. So if we all feel alone, we really aren't alone.
Let's feel alone together.
Yeah, exactly. So I really love what you're doing there. I will put that in the notes section at the end of the episode so everyone can check out your website, check out Anti Loneliness. Today, we are going to pick Vasia's brain about trauma, something that I've learned more about since the pandemic. I've heard the word, but with social media, there's so many different definitions swirling around. So I figured what better person to ask than you because you're so knowledgeable in this area. So please, can you give us your definition of what trauma is?
Yes, I will. Before that, I also want to focus on what you just said, that you didn't know enough about trauma, but during the pandemic, you came more close to what is trauma and what is the connection with your experience. And this is something that has happened to many people. Pandemic was a period where we stayed more with ourselves. We started exploring more things that we haven't had the time so far because we were distracted, busy, all these things. But this period has created the space so that we can be with ourselves, explore, and allow things that they were suppressed to come in the surface again. So for many people, it has been a more insightful period. So thank you for saying that. About trauma now. Trauma is an emotional response to a distressing event, to a deeply distressing event that has overwhelmed our ability to cope. And it has caused a lot of feelings of hopelessness. And it has messed up with our sense of coping with life. Gabor Mate says that trauma is not what happened to you. It's what happened inside you because of what happened to you. And for me, what happened to you, it comes with an overwhelming emotion. For me, it comes with a sense that of responsibility, of defectiveness, of hopelessness. So for me, it's, as Gabor said, it's not what happened to you. It's the fact that you were left feeling responsible for what happened to you, feeling hopeless and helpless for what happened to you, unprotected because of what happened to you. So when we're talking about trauma, we're talking about, of course, the obvious trauma, like, for example, abuse or rape or an accident. And many people usually ask me, like, I haven't gone through any traumatic experience. How come I have trauma response? It's because there's also another kind of trauma, which is the hidden trauma. It's and more of an emotional than a physical experience. It's related sometimes with bullying, betrayal, humiliation, emotional neglect, grief, abandonment, which is not something tangible that you can say it's a physical, a physical experience, but it's more something emotional. And that's why I say that when people go through these kind of emotional experiences, they feel that they are unprotected. I have been betrayed, I have been bullied, but nobody was there to protect me and to support me. Or I have been neglected and I couldn't find any support around me. So again, it's not what happened to you, but the fact that you left alone to believe that you were responsible and you deserved what happened to you.
I love how you're speaking about trauma in general in this sense. I always thought it was a big trauma, like you were saying, and not to take away from those because those are obviously very damaging and devastating. But people don't realize it's just the emotional reaction that you're having that we should focus on. Just because someone didn't have a big trauma doesn't mean you necessarily didn't have one. So I feel like we've all been neglecting that and pushing it under the rug. And now all of a sudden, because of the pandemic, like you were saying before, we're all wondering, oh, have I gone through some type of trauma, or why am I having all these feelings? And one thing I loved, I saw on your Instagram, you posted something really cool. It was about the 4 main trauma responses, which I'll ask you to get into in a moment. But what I loved that was so cool was you were talking about fight, flight, freeze, and fawning, but you didn't just explain that there's it's unhealthy. You also explain the healthy version of it, which I feel like is so important because these responses are going to happen and we're not trying to suppress them, but it's okay to have them. It's just when they're healthy and not when they're unhealthy.
Of course, yeah, we all have another name for trauma responses. It's coping mechanism. So this is a coping mechanism and it has helped you to cope with whatever trauma or emotional experience or challenge in our lives. And because there was no help from an adult or from somebody more knowledgeable at that point, then we figured out that we have to do something by ourselves. And this is where we started figuring out that maybe fight, flight, freeze or fawning is more helpful. And back then, it was really helpful. It helped us survive. It helped us cope with the world, create a sense of safety and predictability in a way, or a sense of control. But we are now, and we are figuring out, is this also now at the present moment useful and helpful? Or we're just using it because it's familiar and actually it's backfiring and it has been depriving us of other important emotional needs, such as connection. So maybe we are still using fawning, which is pleasing other people and prioritizing other people and their needs. But what if this is not necessary right now? It's more helpful if we actually set boundaries, and if we protect ourselves and we protect our relationship, even if we don't use fawning so much.
Right. And I feel like we're using all these coping mechanisms, like you were saying, because we want to protect ourselves, because we remember the first time we experienced a trauma and we never want to feel pain again. We as humans, we don't like to feel that. So we're like, okay, we're going to protect ourselves. But like you said, maybe we're overusing it. Maybe we're not using it in the right instance. And we're really not making those deep connections that are so important for us to grow with people.
Yeah, exactly. And not only we're protecting ourselves, because of course, who wants to get hurt again? Eh? Nobody. But also we believe that there's no other way to protect ourselves. There's only one way: the freeze or the fight or the flight or the fawn. There's only one way. How come there's another way? We haven't thought about it, or we haven't been taught that there should be another way that we can cope with the same challenge right now in our life. And this is what we learn actually in therapy. We learn other ways, healthy alternatives to the coping mechanisms that we have created so far.
So when do we realize that our trauma responses are going from a healthy response to an unhealthy response?
What do you mean? Like,
When, because like we were saying, fight, flight,
yeah,
fawning, and freezing, they're acceptable
okay.
to do, but
Yeah.
when are they appropriate to use and when are they not appropriate to use? I
Oh,
guess,
yeah,
for example,
yeah.
if you have a relationship with someone or a friendship or, something like that.
When it actually backfires and it doesn't get you closer to the relationships you have with others or with yourself. So, for example, if you have learned that fight is the way to go and you're attacking other people, you're getting frustrated, you're aggressive, you demand, you pursue other people so that you. Do you hear me or it's breaking?
Yeah, no, I could hear you. It's
Okay,
okay.
okay, okay. Then what happens is that eventually our relationships are not healthy, because instead of bringing people closer, we're just pushing them back. We're just pushing them further away from us. So this is what I mean with backfire. It's not helpful anymore. Maybe there was a time when we had to protest so that people can give us some attention. Here I am, I have needs. Of course, good job that we did that. Otherwise, they couldn't notice us. But now in our relationship right now, it doesn't work like that. Actually, this is making people not being able to connect with us and disconnecting and not liking us or rejecting us or avoiding us, even if we are reacting in this same way. So if we're not getting our needs met, if we're disconnecting, if we're feeling even more drained, emotionally and physically drained, if we're sabotaging ourselves, our future, our dreams, and our tail, then it means that we are using some coping mechanisms, but without any, not in a helpful way.
That's such a good point because you're right. We're kind of disconnecting from ourselves and from other people to protect ourselves because of what's happened in the past. And I like how I saw another post you posted on Instagram, and I thought that was so cool. It was talking about when we are processing trauma, what are some things that are considered more or less okay to do? Because we have to be patient with ourselves and this experience that we're going through. So I like how you said it's normal to take out how you feel on the people closest to you and things like that. And I was like, okay, good. Maybe I'm not going crazy, but can you elaborate on that? Because I just thought that was such an important point that you touched on.
Well, when we start processing trauma, what happens is that something that we have been suppressing for years, even decades, and we have been pushing it, like under the carpet, in the closet, all these things, we don't try to see that. Then we're starting to open up these gates to start to getting to know our trauma. And when we say we start to get to know our trauma, we start to get to know our pain.
Mm,
And that's a very painful confrontation when you see your pain, because you have been avoiding it for some reason of
mhm.
all these years. And then suddenly you see all this pain, the neglect, the abandonment, the disappointment, the hurt, the sadness, the confusion. And you start seeing that. Of course, it's very overwhelming. And of course, it's not something that can happen in a day or overnight. And you're like, okay, I saw my pain. Okay, I'm done now. I'm healed. No, it doesn't happen like that. It takes time for us to process it. It's a lot. And also, people that they have been through trauma, what also happens is that they also suppress their feelings. So there's this moment now that they're also getting to know their own feelings. What is this feeling? Why am I feeling it? Where is this coming from? What do I do with this feeling? I just hold, a bunch of sadness and a bunch of, like disappointment and rejection. What am I going to do with this? So we are confronted and with a reality that we haven't seen before. That is huge. That is humongous. That is very overwhelming. So it makes sense that while we were going through this period, that we can be more easily irritated, that we can be maybe more isolated, that we don't like hanging out with people during this period. We prefer to be by ourselves. Or maybe if we are in a relationship and we start connecting with these out with feelings to our partner, and we feel like that they're responsible, or not because they're responsible, but because it's the first person that I am connecting these feelings, and they are witnessing all this transformation that is happening with me. So it's normal. I'm not saying that it's the best thing to happen. Of course, I understand that their partner is also feeling like, hey, where's this coming from? Huh? I'm not, I'm just the messenger here. So I get it. And that's why I also mentioned, probably I mentioned that in that post, that include your partner in whatever is happening inside you. Let them know that I'm just processing something big in my life. And maybe I'm going to say, or I'm going to do things that I don't mean, or maybe I'm going to overreact. But give me the benefit of the doubt, or give me a second chance, or have a word with me, or remind me that what is happening is not really has been following me from the past until now. So it's normal. It's normal.
I think it's so important that you're touching on. It can be very overwhelming because I wish we could all just sit in a room, talk to someone for a few hours, and then our trauma is gone. But no, it comes in waves. So sometimes you'll feel happy and sometimes you'll feel sad and sometimes you'll have these reactions. And I'm learning more and more when people have these reactions towards me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that was a very strong reaction. But I realize it really has nothing to do with me. Or sometimes if I have a strong reaction towards somebody else, like we're processing things with not even realizing. So do you think that we don't want to talk about our trauma because it's too hard? Or do you also think it's because sometimes we don't even know that we have this trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said in the beginning, when we're talking about the definition of trauma, sometimes we don't even know. There was also a time that I didn't know that what was trauma, and that I was traumatized as well. So we don't know what is trauma, and sometimes we think that it's only if you have been raped, or if you have been a witness in an accident, or if you have been abused. So we don't know what is trauma. We don't know that we have gone through that. Also, another reason is that we don't want to attract any attention. We don't want to be seen as needy or sensitive or too emotional. We don't want people to say, "Oh, come on, you're big." Huh? We want people to invalidate us. The moment that, because when we have been through trauma, we don't have a lot of trust in people. People are those that have hurt us. So it's not easy to go back to people and trust and share your feelings. So we don't want to encounter another one of these experiences where you express your feelings and people invalidate you and dismiss you. So we don't want to be seen as oversensitive or too weak. Also, another reason is that, as we have said before, that we have dissociated from the feelings or the memories of the trauma. Like, no, I don't remember anything. I have had a fantastic childhood, sometimes we believe. But it's because maybe we have has suppressed in order for us to move on. So sometimes we don't even remember unless we, of course, go to therapy and we start opening up and digging in the past and reconnecting with our memories. And also another thing is also what you said, we think that if we get in touch with our trauma, that's going to be like opening Pandora's box.
Yeah.
What will happen? Am I going to start crying now forever? Am I going to get even worse? Am I going to get a depression? No, 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 I don't want to go there. I'm fine as it is. I can survive, you know, like a little bit of self-sabotage, a little bit of a fight, flight, freeze or fawn. I'm okay. You know, I don't need to be perfect, but I don't want to go there because that can be too overwhelming. That can completely crush me. So we're afraid that something huge and something very overwhelming will happen, that we will not be able to cope with it.
Sometimes I feel like the anticipation is scarier than actually what is, because if I've allowed myself to cry sometimes and I've actually felt a release, and I've actually felt more uncomfortable holding everything in, because you really can't hold this stuff in. Even if you think you have control over it, it's going to come out, and it might come out and spill into my relationships. It might, it might not be so kind to myself. I might be more critical of myself. So either way, it has to just come out. So how is all this
Absolutely.
trauma spilling into our relationships? How does it affect our relationships with ourselves and others?
Yes, yes, you're absolutely correct. And our feelings don't go anywhere. If we don't express them, if we suppress them, they're just stored in our body. And they're going to come out one way or another. Maybe that's going to be through a psychosomatic symptom. Maybe it's going to be through acting out, or maybe it's going to be towards our relationships. So I was reading a book, and that's something that I have in front of me here.
Ooh.
I don't know if you've read it. It didn't start with you.
I'll put that
It's
in the
from,
notes at the end of the episode. No, it looks very good though.
it was a fantastic book. I mean, I just devoured it in a couple of days. It was amazing. It's Mark Walling, and he's talking about inherited family trauma. So not the trauma that has happened to you, but the family trauma that has been traveling through your DNA, but from people that have lived before you, your
Whoa.
grandparents, your parents. It's amazing. It's amazing. So he mentions in this book a sentence that I cannot forget. The distance from your pain is the distance from your partner, which
Wow.
means that the more you're disconnected with your pain and you're not in touch with what has happened to you, with what has hurt you in your life, that's the distance that you're going to keep also from your partner. It's in between you. You cannot have a healthy relationship if you haven't processed all these overwhelming emotions. A trauma doesn't allow you to connect, doesn't allow you to show intimacy to your partner. It doesn't allow you to trust. Remember that we said before that we don't trust others. But also what happens in trauma is that after we experience a traumatic emotional experience, we don't feel safe with our body. So if you don't feel safe with yourself, how is it possible that you're going to give this body to somebody else? How is it possible that you connect physically with somebody else and you allow yourself to be touched, to be caressed, to be held, to be hugged without cringing, without being like, oh, okay, I had enough now. So it doesn't allow us. Also, in another way that it's spilling into a relationship is that because we find it difficult to trust, also there are more intense arguments in relationships. We fight, we get triggered more easily. We think that our partner doesn't approve of us, doesn't accept us. All these things that other people in our life have done during our childhood and created this trauma, we think that it's still happening, even though it's not happening. This is how we're projecting it. We see the world, we see our partner, we see family members or our friends through this filter that people don't like me, people will hurt me. You cannot trust people. These are the glasses that we see, the lens that we see people from. In other cases, we're also repeating patterns of abuse. If we have been abused, then what happened is that we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. It feels familiar to be around people that they're not available. We subconsciously choose these people, not because we like it, but it feels familiar. We have been there, we have experienced that, we know that it is. Or in a way, we're choosing these people again subconsciously because we want to change the narrative. We hope that this time it will be different. And that's why we have this unfinished business that we want to change. And we keep finding unavailable partners. We choose to, again, subconsciously, to allow neglect, to allow abuse, to allow disrespect from our partners. And this is how the vicious circle continues. The more we're not aware of our trauma, the more we allow this to continue.
I really love that sentence from the book, the distance between us and our trauma is the distance between us and our partner, because it's showing that your trauma obviously is your trauma, but it's also your partner's trauma because it affects how you interact. It affects if they're emotionally available to you. Like you said, people might not want to talk about their trauma, but at least if you let the person know, this is what I'm going through. So this might be a trigger, just to communicate and open up those lines so you could just work with them better. I think that that's such an
Absolutely.
interesting point that you touched on. Do you think that our trauma can impact our attachment styles, like who we go towards, because we don't want to be, like you said, we don't want to be uncomfortable. So we want to find people and situations that are more comfortable and safe for us?
Yes, yes. It makes a big difference whether we are aware or we are processing our trauma or we're not aware. If we have been through a traumatic experience in our past, it's possible that this traumatic experience has contributed in our attachment style. So, for example, just because of that experience, we are more avoidant, or we're more anxious or disorganized style. If we're not aware of that, then it's possible that we will attract relationships that resemble the past relationships or the personality or the behavior of the people of our past. So what happens then is we are just signing up for more trauma, because unavailable partners or abusive partners, disrespectful partners will come to our life. It will feel familiar and it will connect with our attachment style, and then more trauma will happen and more confirmation and more evidence that, see, I told you, people are not to be trusted. I need to be on alert, or I need to be avoidant. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a vicious circle.
It sounds like a cycle and we're not even aware of it, because how many people do you know that are like, oh, I just dated this person and he was just like the last one, or she was just like the last one. And we really think we don't have control over it, but we're really just continuing to do the same pattern because it feels comfortable, it feels safe, it's something that we know. Or like you said, which I never even thought of, maybe everyone's picking the same person because they want to change the narrative. They're like, okay, this one will be different.
But yeah, this one is, I can give you an example. If you have been raised by an alcoholic parent, for example, neglect, emotional deprivation, also how it is feeling responsible for your parent and taking all the guilt for them. And what happens is that we, again, without knowing, without being aware of that, we choose partners that we have to take care of them, that we have to be responsible for them. And we hope that this time it will change, it will be different. The other person will acknowledge, or the other person will connect with us if we take care of them. But if they're not also aware of their trauma, it's not going to happen. We're just repeating the same scenario over and over again. And it makes a huge difference whether the other person knows about the trauma or not. I remember a couple that I used to treat a couple of years ago, and the wife was aware. She has been doing therapy for a long time, and she was aware of her own trauma, but she was also aware of the trauma of her husband. So her husband followed up with therapy a couple of, years or months later. I don't remember. And when he was going through therapy, he started becoming more irritated, more not
Defensive, maybe.
aggressive, yeah, defensive. But the fact that she knew about her and she knew about him helped so much that she was able to be the calming power in their relationship and tell him when he was being defensive that I know your anger, and I know that this has been the anger that you wanted to address towards your father all these years. And it's coming up in the surface. And I know it's not about me. I know that. And that has been so liberating for him and for their relationship. And that has helped them survive during this period, because she knew and she was not defensive and she could understand her husband's pain.
I mean, my gosh, I feel like it's such a powerful moment when you recognize your trauma or you recognize your partner's trauma, because it just makes you think of everything that's happening to you. You really don't have a back seat to everything. We can be in control of certain things. And that's so great because she could be a facilitator to him dealing with his own trauma and just give them clarity. Because I'm sure if they were arguing, it was probably based around both of their traumas and they didn't understand why they were arguing, but now they more or less have a certain path that they could better understand each other.
Absolutely. And they were facilitating each other's healing. And that was an amazing moment.
And you must have been so happy to be a part of that too. So that's so great. That actually feeds into my next question that I have for you. What are some tips, like ways we could deal with trauma while maintaining our relationships and forming new ones? Like now that we know that we have trauma, how do we face it while we're not just a romantic relationship, but, friend relationships, family relationships?
Well, the first thing that for me it's important is to accept that we have been through trauma. I mean, I don't think that there's anybody that hasn't gone through that. As long as there's pain in our life, there's also trauma. So all of us have gone through some big, small, hidden, or obvious trauma or traumatic experiences. I don't think that there's anybody that can say, well, I have never been hurt in my life. My life has been like heaven. I haven't met this person. I don't know. So, even Dalai Lama is talking about his father that has been aggressive, and he has been, the recipient of this aggression when he was a child. So we all have been through trauma. And so let's create a space in ourselves that it's okay. We don't need to feel ashamed. There's nothing, like a label or something that it means we are defective, we are broken, we are damaged. No, we're just human beings, and we're just carrying all this experience with us. And there's nothing wrong about that. The only thing that we can do is just share it with each other and feel relief. So owning our story is very important. Accepting what has happened to us and owning our story. This is what brought us here. This is our story. This is our path. It was not the best possible way. It was not the happiest trajectory, but it's our story. Allowing our feelings to be felt. And especially when we're feeling that, what if I'm going to be overwhelmed by my feelings? What if I will never stop crying? Just remember that feelings are just temporary visitors, guests. They're here for a while. We're going to be sad. We're going to be confused. We're going to be disappointed. We're going to be angry, but it's not going to stay here forever. It's just a guest to stay for a couple of days, to pass a message. I'm bringing a message to you that you were angry. You are angry now because somebody has overstepped your boundaries. Okay? Did you get the message? Good. Now I can go. And then the feeling goes on and another one comes. So find a place so that you can also accept your feelings. They're there for a while, and there's nothing wrong about that. Accepting your feelings, you're also accepting yourself. Become mindful of our self-talk and of our triggers. What is it that triggers us, what are the situations, and what is it that we say to ourselves when we're being triggered. We're being triggered, and then we're saying to ourselves something like, oh, see, nobody values me, nobody thinks that I'm important, see, everybody wants to be smart, and implying that I'm the stupid one. Trying to realize, what is the story, what is the self-talk? Share, of course, your story. That's very relieving. Share your story with your therapist, or maybe if you're not ready to share it with your therapist, maybe start journaling, write it down, share it with a friend, but with a friend that you can trust, and not with anybody. And one thing that is also important, as we said before, when we're going through trauma, our body doesn't feel safe. It's not a safe vessel anymore, because it's holding something that we feel ashamed of. And exercise and breathing exercises and grounding exercise help a lot, so that we start creating a safety again with our body, understanding our body, accepting it. So all these help a lot. It's not something psychological, but it's more like in a holistic way. We're creating a new relationship with our body. We're not afraid anymore. And we start loving again ourselves.
These are all so helpful, and I really appreciate you taking the time to explain them to us, because I feel like at the root of it, if we acknowledge our trauma and we're raising our awareness and we're putting the work in and we're being more patient with ourselves, we really do have a chance to just not just be happy, but be the truest version that we are, and not just like you were saying before, it's almost like you're not being authentic. If you're not dealing with your trauma, you're not connecting to yourself, you're not connecting to others, and you're not being who you really are meant to be.
Exactly, exactly. And there's a huge block inside us, a self-sabotaging power that stops us from feeling fulfilled in our life, and going after our dreams and our passions. And I have met a lot of people that they know what they want from their life, and it's just one step away, but they're not doing this step. There's something blocking them. And most of the times, this is the trauma, this is the unprocessed feelings and beliefs they have about themselves. And they're just one step away.
Well, hopefully today we're all one step away from acknowledging our trauma, being closer to understanding ourselves and each other. Vasya, I really appreciate you coming on. I would love to have you on again. You're so knowledgeable. I feel very comfortable talking to you. I feel like the listeners will definitely appreciate this episode. Before we wrap up, can you please tell us about any upcoming projects you have and where everyone can reach you?
You can find a lot of free resources that I have in my website, AntiLoneliness.com. I have created a list with book recommendations about trauma, perfectionism, anxiety, depression, grief, if you like reading. If you're not ready to take that step and start therapy, maybe reading is for you, books are for you. So I have a lot of recommendations. I'm working a lot on perfectionism, and I have a free guide there that you can see, you can grab, and you can see what is perfectionism and how much of a perfectionist you are. You can also see the services that I'm offering, therapy, support groups, and my workshops in there. And of course, feel free to contact me, see the content that I publish every day on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, which is, as you have seen, with a lot of information and a lot of content about mental health.
Yeah, I will definitely tag everything in the notes, because her videos are so great, guys. You really have to see them. They're on Instagram. That's where I found Vasya, and I saw them, and they're helpful, but they're just short videos that really sum everything up, and they really do make you feel like you're not alone. So you're definitely on the right track with that. The last thing we do on the show is I put the person in the hot seat a little bit. If you could have one tagline for life, what would yours be?
You are not alone.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that gave me the chills. We really aren't alone. I mean, how
No.
often do we all hear these stories and we think it's just only us, but how many of us, when we hear the story, say, I felt that too? It's very interesting.
Yes. Yes, and I have experienced that many times, and especially in my groups, my divorce groups, grief support groups that I have organized for a lot of years. And people, even before they start sharing their stories, they already feel that they're not alone, just because there's another person sitting next to them, having been through the same experience, they already feel, ah, now I feel better.
Lighter, connected.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Vasia,
Yeah.
thank you so much, guys. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, tell your friends, your loved ones, your enemies, everyone. We will be posting this soon, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
You too.